So guys, welcome to the first battle report in this league that I'm participating in here in Santiago, Chile. It's a ninth age league, and I'm participating in the league with my ogres, ogre cons as they're referred to in ninth age. It's a 2,500 point league, and in my group I'll be facing off against different armies. Uh, this is the first battles, and I organized to meet up with the ancient Saurians. So here you have a view of the battlefield pre-deployment. As you can see, almost all the scenery is off to one side of the table, and as we pull the diagonal deployment, I chose the side with the terrain to leave, the field open so that I can choose my angles of attack, probably even get some flanking maneuver against the Saurians, who I know by habit, we've played before, tend to bunch together because they stay very near to that 10 leadership bubble, and as he's playing a Wizard of Light, being able to cast off aura on some of those spells could be pretty damaging. So here's the table. As you can see, there's a hill, forest, house. Those are the basic terrain pieces that you follow when you set up a ninth. And we pulled two ruins, so we put them both. Each of us placed a ruin, and we both agreed that in the center, 6 inches apart, would make things interesting. I opted for the side with the terrain with the hill to my back, because I didn't want those kinks to have anywhere to hide. And I deployed, as you'd see, in a very determined way as we get into the battle. So as we're getting ready to look at the deployment, as we set it up, I should mention that our secondary objective is to end up with at least one scoring unit. That is a unit with standard in the enemy's deployment zone. So looking at the ogres, from my point of view, going from left to right, we have three well, what used to be Monfang, but now they're called Tuskers. Still getting used to the new names, and so those three Tuskers are with heavy armor and weapons, two-handed weapons, and great weapons, as they're called, and they have a full command. So standard bearer, musician, and champion. So this unit for me is a cornerstone unit because, as some of you more expert players can see from the deployment, uh, I put them there because they have a standard and they're a scoring unit. And I should mention we deployed in the following way: that the Saurians put down the unit with the slan, and then on my turn I just put everything on the table because my battle plan uh, hinged on this unit being able to get into very quickly into the enemy's deployment zone and disturbing their plan of advance. So, you know, it's often said that Warhammer Fantasy can be won in the deployment phase. It's really important to choose to have your battle plan, to not be really reactive to the enemy. So I decided that this unit was going to be my go-to unit to be scoring. I right next to them I put the bombardiers with the cannon. They're pretty good at denying enemy cavalry. So as you'll see in a moment, he deploys his cavalry as far away as possible from these guys, because they can, on a lucky set of rolls, really hurt cavalry. So right next to them, I put my ogre chaff unit. Now, ogres don't have really cheap units for chaffing, so I had to invest in three of these guys. They're not really expensive, just about, I would say, just over 100 points, 105 4 or 5 points. I can't remember right now. And they were there to redirect any heavy charges. Remember, I did all of my deployment before most of the Saurians were on the table. Right next to them, I have my bruisers. So these guys, they all have two-handed weapons. As you can see, there are eight of them plus my battle standard bearer, who had a really interesting standard, which the the dragon standard that gives the reroll of all ones during the turn they charge, and also is a breath weapon, which I actually later on forgot to use, but didn't get a chance to use actually. And right next to them, I have my general, Great Khan, who is pretty well mapped out. He's got the blind eye to make sure that I can, at least for one turn, protect them against direct damage spells. And interestingly, the Yeti furs, which means that anything in base to base with him has a -3 initiative. I put that there so that he would be able to hit something before it hit him. The real thing about this champion, however, is the fact that I, for the first time, used Hellfist, which allowed me to put the mark of Wrath on the veterans who were with him. So these veterans have +1 to hit, and they are basically immune to the effects of fear. They also have a standard, which gives them +1 in combat. So to give them a little that edge they might need. And I put them with great weapons, two-handed great weapons. So I mean, this is a unit that basically hits on strength 7. To make them even tougher, I gave them the Thunderous Charge upgrade, yeah, and Bodyguard upgrade. So that means they were going to be Stubborn 9 against anything that hit them, assuming they survived, of course. Right next to them, you can see that I put my pet, or my Khan's pet, my Stonehorn, as it used to be called, the Rock Aurochs, as is today. She has a name. She's Lucy. Lucy has been indispensable in wrecking enemy plans in almost every single battle that she's been involved in, and having that stone skeleton rule is really helpful. The guy on top has the hunter has lance, so on the charge he can put out some strength 6 damage. Right next to Lucy, you can see I have another Mournfang Cavalry. Now this is my light Mournfang Cavalry, or Tuskers as they're called. I keep getting the names mixed up. The Tuskers are they're a combination of redirecting and probably getting a flank. I knew there were going to be spears on the table, so there was no way I was going to charge into any unit with spears. But taking them in the flank or a rare charge if I got lucky enough to have one, which I didn't believe I would in this battle, but just in case. The fact that they do D3 impact hits and then they can stomp on almost anything on the enemy's list made them really viable, even though they're not as hard hitting as their brothers on the other end of the line. Right next to them, I have my level 2 Fire Mage, who pulled. I just kept Fireball because I think it's always important to have an offensive spell, a shooty spell, and he got that the other one that on the other end of the list that gave +1 toughness and a 5 ward save to any unit he targeted. So that was a spell that I believed would have added some sort of value to any of the ogre units, making them base toughness 5, or in the case of the Rock Aurochs, could even get to toughness 7. Sorry. So he went along with a unit of ogres, iron fisted off, and they they're there for scoring. They have the standard, so they're trying to make sure that on the other end, if something happens, I have a unit that can march forward really quickly to take up scoring positions. On the other end of the line, if you look at it from the point of view of the enemy, he had a very different disposition. Uh, as expected, he sort of bunched everybody together, uh, trying to keep everybody around the slan. So from his left, he's got the Stegodon, or I don't know what it's called today. It's a really strange name. I think they did need to do some work on some of these names in fantasy ninth age. But he's still one of the most destructive units on the enemy's list because of the fact that his impact hits deal out D3 damage. So that's pretty tough against ogres. In fact, in a previous battle, he basically wiped out a unit just on impact charges. So it's something I'm really concerned about. So that's kind of why, even though I deployed before he did, I had cavalry on both flanks to intercept. Right next to them, he put his spear, uh, his raptor cavalry. Now, I know the raptor cavalry unit was tough, but as we'll see, it's mind-blowingly tough. So I knew that I had to watch out for that cavalry. It's one of the two units on the board that can match my speed. So happily, he put it right. I mean, facing off right against my general. I suppose he thought at some point he would charge my general. It would have been interesting to see, or it probably will be, to see how something like that will work out. But as we'll see, things took a strange turn during the battle. Right next to them, he's got moving towards his right, uh, the spears. Now, I really and truly fear this unit. They have a 3-up save. They've got that predator, which now um, allows them to reroll once, and he's got the standard, which pumps it up to 2, which means he gets to basically reroll all failed rolls because of their weapon skill. They'll be hitting me on 3s anyway, mostly. So that's a pretty tough unit. I can't charge it with cavalry to the front. It's death. So I'm trying to find a flank here. He, on his right, uh, in a strange move, he put his 2 skink units, one with blowpipes and one with javelins, facing off against heavy cavalry. So I thought that that was a bit strange. I mean, looking at my disposition, my deployment, he's got to think that those guys are going to hit him hard. But he does it anyway. And it's given the fact that they both have to be within 12 to hit me, that's a pretty dangerous zone to be in close to ogres. And as you can see, the first unit he placed was the Temple Guard with the Slan, a unit that I basically avoid um, getting into any combat with, unless I have them in a 2, maybe 3-sided attack. That's the only way you can really bring down a unit like that. Or if Lucy gets into contact with them, she can do a lot of damage, hold them long enough for someone to flank charge them. But it's a unit, because of their stubbornness, you really have to be careful about the moment you charge them. So here we are, deployed off, and I'm going to take you guys into the first turn. Okay, so in my first turn, uh, basically I set my plan into motion, which is basically to keep still in the middle and on the right of my line and move the left, so as to create a bit of a curve to get the ancient Saurians thinking, okay, so if we take the flank here, one flank or the other, we can get easily hit by the other flank. So basically, we just sort of shuffled forward, uh, concentrating on having my general look as threatening as possible. I mean, his job really was just to stand there and look really mean, so as to get the Saurians to think twice about moving forward. As you notice, if you look at remember from the deployment, uh, it meant that his battle line couldn't really move forward comfortably because of the space between the forest and the ruins. So, and if they did, they would, as you would see in later photos, open up their flanks. So my boss just stood there looking threatening, doing his part of the plan, keeping the enemy at a distance, and my rock aurochs Lucy just stood there, sort of grimacing at people, and so that I didn't move any part of the right flank. So those miniatures stayed exactly where those units stayed exactly where they were, and the real fast movers, my heavy Tusker cavalry, started shouting at people and growling and moving forward. They did the most advanced, followed very slowly by the ogres who were on the left, including impotently the bombardiers. In the magic phase, we sort of equaled out on dice. I got six, he got uh, five, and then channeled one, so nothing happened. With a Slan level 4 who bore gifts of having 4 plus to channel and uh, plus 1 to cast, it was going to be a really tough sell to depend on magic. So I knew from right up front that my magic would probably do little or nothing in this battle. Um, Although I had some pretty good spells, he's got a level 4 light wizard with skill with the spells from 2 to 5, which sort of give him the ability to buff up his units really well in combat. So I realized that it wasn't going to do anything. In the shooting phase, my bombardiers probably took out a couple of skinks, and there was no combat. So, as you can see from the photo, I've moved up just on my left. So certainly he's faced with the fact that his skinks are going to be charged pretty much whatever he does. So I mean, if I'm looking at it from his point of view, and I can pretty much say that if I advance, I'm going to be very quickly surrounded. So there he is going into his turn one with a bit of a dilemma. So the Saurian turn begins with the notable fact that they just don't move. Uh, they sit right where they are. I suppose thinking that caution would be the better part of valor in this case. Um, I think, I don't know, sitting on his side of the table, I'd probably be cautious myself with the ogres approaching so quickly. But I think he was gonna try to give his magic just a little more time to do what it had to do. So he sits still and just sort of shuffles up his shooting wing into range of my cavalry, my swiftly approaching cavalry, and uh, starts off with magic. He gets off speed of light, but blinding speed no, and he gets off speed of light on his raptor knights, which would be the old cavalry unit. Pretty tough unit with a lord in it, really tooled up for combat, and with a 4 plus ward save, something I know nothing about, being an ogre and not having the cash for fancy trinkets, uh, or even ancient stones that saves me from everything. But this guy, as you see later on, he really ticks me off. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Um, so the magic doesn't really do anything, and it's interesting that he didn't choose any offensive spells. So we kind of just sit there magically looking at each other while he buffs himself up. Shooting, well, his skinks go to work with their poison shooting and manage to cause 3 wounds to my heavy Tusker cavalry, which I all save with my 3 up save. Thankfully, it worked. Uh, but when he puts those blowpipes towards my bombardiers, well, things go bad really quickly. He basically puts 4 wounds on them, killing one of them right off and causing the other two to, well, run away as they fail their leadership test and go scampering off. Um, that basically puts an end to the turn with my guys running away. Fatefully, I managed to pass my check for both the ogres and the tuskers that were on each flank of the bombardiers. I mean, really, that would have been really terrible since they were not really far away from my BSB, but it, re-rolling sevens is not really a good portent either. So not much movement, but causing a little bit of panic in my lines. So the next turn, well, we do what we have to do. Tuskers charging to the skinks that are nearest to them. Stand and shoot does nothing. Um, Same with the ogres who were next to the bombardiers. They charge the blowpipe skinks, and in that charge, they basically they lose one of their number, but are able to pass the leadership test miraculously and get into the combat. So I'm really happy that he didn't move them out of the way, which is what he probably should have done. And but we we get into the charge. The rest of the line, as you can see, doesn't do much moving. They sort of inch around. The bruisers and the general's unit inch up very slowly, maintaining their distance from the cavalry, making sure that it's a long charge. I mean, quite frankly, I was looking to charge that unit and not be charged by it, so that I was able to do that, at least for this turn, was also a really good thing for me. Magic, again, I was basically shut down. I got 10 dice, but he was able to dispel, even though I got the firebolt off on the second level of difficulty. As I was trying to weaken that cavalry unit, he was able to shut it down with his almighty slan. Um, so basically, I was able, however, to get off the spell that buffs up my general's unit with +1 toughness and the ward save. The problem with it is that I miscast, and he didn't opt to dispel it. Damn him! And but I got off really lucky with just 1 wound on my wizard and I think 2 wounds on the unit, so not bad. So that I was thinking, okay, if they charge me, if that cavalry unit charges, my ogres are going to be toughness 5, which kind of brings things down, makes it a little more survivable against the lances, but not much so. In the shooting phase, there's nothing happening because my I forgot to mention in movement phase, my bombardiers kept running. So they haven't regrouped and they're running really quickly. Um, so I'm left without shooting, which brings me to the combat. And well, it was really good. I mean, as you would expect, the Tuskers in their impact hits killed 5 skinks outright, and then proceeded not to be wounded. Um, they were wounded twice, but managed to save. And then the beasts did all the work and snapped up and chewed up all those skinks, uh, not leaving anything much for the ogres on top to eat. So they were kind of hoping to get their hands on some lizard a little later on, um, make a soup, but they were just able to reform and they fulfilled their part of my secret plan, as you would see later on. The ogres, of course, uh, failed to kill many in impact hits of the skinks they charged. Uh, in combat, I rolled more ones than I had ever seen in my life. I think I rolled 8 dice and got 6 ones, and were able to just win the combat by, I think, let me see if I remember. They were able to win the combat by 2. And here's where the fun starts. For his leadership check, he rolls 3 6s. You know that they have the cold-blooded rule, which those of you who know ancient saurians would know that makes it really hard for them to be broken, especially if they're near that, as I mentioned before, the 10 leadership bubble. And the second time he rolled a 3 5 and a 2, staying on leadership 5, so he was fine. So that was pretty much it. I mean, there wasn't anything else that happened of note, but I feel really good about what's happening now because uh, I'm threatening his general. So, I mean, even though I think if I charge him, I would probably win combat, though it's iffy against units with strength 5 halberds and cold-blooded and the predator rules. Uh, it would have been a tough matchup, but at least I would have kept them busy. But I decided that at this point, I mean, I decided at deployment, but I decided at this point that I had already won. If I did nothing, if nothing else happened, the 500 points that I would get from having those Tuskers in his deployment zone basically won me the game. That's assuming we just sit there and look at each other, but it's never like that, is it? So, as we move on to the next phase, you'll see that the fun really starts. So, I guess looking at my initial success, my opponent must be thinking at this point, he's got to do something. And what he does basically now defines the game. He starts off with a charge of his raptors. Now, oh man, raptors. Uh, these guys are terrible. I mean, it sucks to be on the other side of their lances. And I was thinking, okay, he's gonna go for the general's unit. I was all prepped. Remember, we're all buffed. We're like toughness 5, and we can choose to be either two-handed weapons at strength 7 or uh, hit him at initiative 4, which would have been pretty devastating. But you know, things are, as I said, never simple. He goes after my BSB. Now, it's a pretty long charge, and he needs to get like somewhere about 10 or more on the dice. But remember, he's swift striding, so. But still, I'm thinking, okay, even if he tries it, I'm hoping he tries it because then I'll be able to get a really successful charge off. But as I said, we all know that when the gods of the dice are at work, strange things happen. So he rolls, I think it's a 6, a 5, and a 4, and gets the charge in. And that's the only thing he does. He basically stays still. His Stegodon shuffles to get a good angle on the guys, the ogres behind the forest with the mage. Uh, Nothing else. The guard turn to face the Tusker cavalry that has appeared on their flank, but don't advance. Something I found a bit strange, given the fact that I believe that with rank bonus and everything else, they probably could handle the Tuskers on their own, especially with what he was about to do in the magic phase, where he got off 8 dice versus 5. He got off the weapon skill and initiative 10 on his cavalry. Now, I could have stopped it, but I didn't. Um, oh, decisions we make. So, but I did manage to dispel his attempt to put the other buff, which gives one extra attack, on the skinks that were fighting. So now this is an old picture before my charge. I apologize that we don't the beginning of this turn. I think my buddy was doing the photography, and I think he was a bit worried about the Tusker cavalry to take a photo. But if you look carefully at the photo, by this time the the ogres that were three there on the right side of the picture had come up and done their damage, but the skinks stuck, as I mentioned before. So moving on to the charge, I mean, he got blinding speed off, as I said. His Stegodon took, oh, I don't know what it's called now. It's a long name, I can't remember. And he hits Lucy, and he wounds Lucy. Gets multiple wounds too, but fortunately she brings it down to one with her rock skeleton. In the combat, remember, these raptors are weapon skill 10, initiative 10. And he's got this creepy guy, on a raptor, his lord, who's got 5 attacks and rerolls ones and has a +1 strength sword, so he's hitting at strength 6. Plus, he's got a raptorite, so he challenges off my BSB uh, and kills him outright. 4 wounds, done, dead. Goodbye, standard. And the rest of the raptors hit before my bruisers, causing a total of 9 wounds, killing off the back rank. Now, that's not terrible in and of itself. What's terrible is when you hit back with, I don't know, somewhere upwards of 15, 16 attacks, and you only cause 2 wounds. I mean, it was absolutely, I mean, it was heartbreaking. I expected I expected the back rank to be wiped out, but I knew that wouldn't affect the unit's attacks. But it was incredible to watch. Not only did I fail, but I managed only to wound 5, and he was able to save 3 of those 5. So, uh, again, I roll uh, badly, and things go badly for me. Uh, However, on the opposite end, where the skinks face off the rest of the bulls, or tribesmen as they're called now, I was able to, despite 5 out of 6 ones, actually kill them with the stomp attacks and clear up that unit. And I just sort of angled them so that if the Temple Guard charged, they would be giving the flank to the Tuskers. So, not a bad turn for him. He nets a lot of points, including my BSB. Uh, I should mention that the important thing here, the critical, and this is where you have to think ahead in 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 this game. He overruns. Now, just to let you know, I have to go back to that combat with the Raptors. Apologies for not finishing, but I think my mind was sort of blanking out the trauma that was caused, because not only did he kill off, beat me in the combat 13-2, and I failed my leadership check. Obviously, I couldn't roll a double one when I needed ones. I can't roll them, and they basically get run down by the Raptors. Now, if you look carefully at the photo, you notice that my general is facing the wrong way. That's because he fails his leadership 9 check on 11 and runs off. Fortunately for me, he only runs 5 inches, so he doesn't get into the front arc of those overrunning raptors. Or I guess that would have been the end of the game. They ran very slowly uh, and basically set up the decisive charge of the game. I mean, really, at this point, you expert players would be going, "Oh my gosh, he just rode his cavalry unit, his one of his 2 fast movers, into the midst of my army," uh, and that that was a biggie. It could probably have turned really, really terribly for me had my general's unit ran, I think, as 10 or anywhere between 10, 11, 12. If they had run that far, they would have been dead. Um, but fortunately, they only ran 5. and as you'll see in the future turns, the game turns around. I mean, that was a big blow. Failing the leadership at first had me cussing in French and German and Spanish and Italian, but I got a grip on myself and realized that wait a minute, his fast movers are in the middle of my army. So I realized that at that point, um, if he if I managed to psych him into staying where he was with the really powerful units of his army, I could deal with these guys. I could deal with these guys, can I? I mean, well, assuming I don't roll any more ones. I was kind of hoping that I had already rolled all the ones I was going to roll. And this is where, in the beginning of my turn, I have no charges to declare. I sit back with the Tuskers who are off the screen to your, like out of this shot on the my far left, as you know. He was a bit surprised that they didn't charge, but I worked it out and figured they're worth 500 points just sitting where they are and distracting his temple guard and slam, while at the same time getting me 500 points for just being there. Um, so looking at the game, this is the third turn. We're halfway through the game in the 5 turns that we play in the league. Um, I I decide I'm gonna for go for those raptors. So luckily I roll, I think it was 6 or 7 on my leadership check in the obligatory phase, and they just turn to face the rear. The general and his unit turn to face the rear of the raptors who had ridden past them in their pursuit of the battle standard bearer and the bruisers. Um, Lucy, my rock oryx, then sort of trots around and puts herself right up, uh, not right up against them, but putting herself in a position that they can ride around her. So yeah, that unit is in a lot of trouble right now. They've got rock oryx in their flank, and I decide I'm not going to chance anything. No bad magic. I have no shooting left. Nobody's in combat, so I have a really quick turn. I think so much on this game at this point depended on that roll for the regrouping, for which you have to remember I no longer have a reroll. So thankfully they stuck it and turned around to face the flank of the soon-to-be in a lot of trouble Raptors. And this is where, in the beginning of my turn, I have no charges to declare. I sit back with the Tuskers who are off the screen to your, like out of this shot on my far left, as you know. He was a bit surprised that they didn't charge, but I worked it out and figured they're worth 500 points just sitting where they are and distracting his temple guard and slam, while at the same time getting me 500 points for just being there. Um, so looking at the game, this is the third turn. We're halfway through the game in the 5 turns that we play in the league. Um, I I decide I'm gonna for go for those raptors. So luckily I roll, I think it was 6 or 7 on my leadership check in the obligatory phase, and they just turn to face the rear. The general and his unit turn to face the rear of the raptors who had ridden past them in their pursuit of the battle standard bearer and the bruisers. Um, Lucy, my rock oryx, then sort of trots around and puts herself right up, uh, not right up against them, but putting herself in a position that they can ride around her. So yeah, that unit is in a lot of trouble right now. They've got Rock Aurochs in their flank, and I decide I'm not going to chance anything. No bad magic. I have no shooting left. Nobody's in combat, so I have a really quick turn. I think so much on this game at this point depended on that roll for the regrouping, for which you have to remember I no longer have a reroll. So thankfully they stuck it and turned around to face the flank of the soon to be in a lot of trouble Raptors. And I have to say at this point it was clear to me that I had won. Uh, So I made the charge, the winning charge. Lucy got into combat and pretty much squashed the entire unit. Um, she caused something like she killed six of them outright with the charge. I rolled really high for my impact hits, and I got uh, a five, well, five, five, and a three. So, well, that's getting ahead of myself, but there was absolutely no magic, no shooting, and we went straight for it. Um, she caused eight impact hits, killing six of them, no, seven of them outright. Her she didn't get her all her attacks and the attacks of the guy on top went to the Lord, obviously. Um, no, sorry, killed off the champion of the unit, and more wounds, put two wounds on the Lord. Uh, so he, with his cold blooded, rolled a triple six and then a 6-5-4. So he ran off the board. Uh, Lucy did the check to restrain, passed it amazingly, and was able to reform, as you can see her in the photo looking at the center. So that was it. I mean, what happens for the next two turns is basically we do nothing for the last turn, for the fifth turn, and he amazingly just falls back with all his units. Um, and takes a pot shot with the Stegadon, and basically the game goes on to turn five, but that's just in name only because he had forgotten completely the objective. So when we counted up the points, it's amazing, but there was only 1 point of difference between us in terms of losses. 1 point. But I won the battle by 501 points simply because he had forgotten the objective for the entire game. I mean, he paid no attention to it. I mean, so looking back, uh, I could have chanced combat, but I could pretty much say from turn three, I knew I was winning the battle because even if he had marched forward the spears, he wouldn't have gotten to me. And if he had marched forward, sorry, with his temple guard, I would have just ridden around him. So I was the only one of the two who had fulfilled the secondary objective, which is I play 40k, so I don't want to say line breaker, but uh, basically getting into his deployment zone, and that decided the game. I have to say my MVP was, of course, Lucy. Once again, spectacular job. I was a bit sad that my general didn't get into combat, but I don't think I would have done as well against his lord. I mean, it would have been a really tough sell, really hard battle for me. I was so happy to notice that he was so intimidated by units he could have beaten. I believe really he has a really good army, but to be fair, this is his I think third battle in ninth age with these troops. He's an orc player as well and is a little more versed with them, but I think he was a bit too cautious in his approach to the game, giving me the chance to dictate what happened, and I chose to sit comfortably with my win and not take unnecessary risks. I believe if I had charged with my general, I would probably not have broken the spears. They would have steadfast, and then the stegodon would have, just smacked into me. That thing sucks because of, as I mentioned before, the DH3, but it needs to get the charge off. So he was duly cautious looking at my Tuskers nearby. So knowing that if he advanced too far, I would get a charge on him, removing effectively one of his most important anti-ogre weapons from at least 2 turns of combat. So I think he was being really cautious. If I were in on his side of the table, I would have been a little more aggressive, especially with the Temple Guard, since they are a unit that once their flanks are protected, you'd be crazy to just charge them with just anything. You have to, and given that he would get lethal strike against my cavalry, I mean, I would have been really cautious myself to have advanced on them. So great game. My opponent is always fun to play with, and keep tuned. Keep tuned into this channel. It's a brand new channel, as you can see, but I hope to be putting up some more video reports in the future. Thanks for watching.